Hello, welcome to Witness. I'm Raggy Omar. Mention the word Vietnam and most people instinctively cast their minds back 30 years to America's disastrous military adventure. Very few people think of Vietnam today, where for many people, the war has not ended. 3 decades on from America's defeat, Vietnamese babies are still being born with awful birth defects and genetic abnormalities. The legacy, many believe, of the United States' massive and long-term use of chemical weapons in the war. Dioxins are the most dangerous chemicals on Earth, 100,000 times more powerful than any natural chemical. Agent Orange is one such dioxin, and it was sprayed over Vietnam's jungles for 8 years in an attempt to target the communist North Vietnamese forces. For years, the United States argued that there was no evidence linking birth defects with Agent Orange. It was only when American Vietnam veterans started to complain of health effects that manufacturers began to pay compensation. In a moment, I'll be speaking to Gerson Smoger, an American human rights lawyer working on behalf of Vietnamese and American veterans seeking compensation. But first, a look at scenes from Battle's Poison Cloud by Cecile Trisenar.
In an attempt to halt the domino effect of communism rolling through Southeast Asia, from 1965, for 8 years, the United States dispatched their forces to Vietnam to engage in guerrilla warfare against the North Vietnamese army. But they miscalculated the ingenuity of the Viet Cong enemy. They were impossible to find. The tunnel system was extensive. Here at Cu Chi, 250 kilometers of underground passages connected 6 outlying villages. Several stories deep, over 16,000 Viet Cong lived, performed medical operations and made weapons in horrific conditions for months, sometimes years at a time. Faced with this invisible enemy, the Americans resorted to a massive firepower campaign, dropping more bombs than all the ordnance dropped in World War II. The relentless bombing campaign across South Vietnam did not achieve its objectives. With the enemy still at large, hidden in the dense jungle cover, the Americans devised a far more insidious weapon: chemicals.
We hear people yelling about chemical warfare, and I ask you, what is chemical warfare? They're doing it in Colombia right now. We're spraying all over Colombia to kill marijuana, kill the cocos. So you have to ask yourself, what is chemical warfare? What is the legal? We know what the legal term is, but what is the moral term of it? What do you do when you spray 20 million gallons of chemicals? If that isn't chemical warfare, I don't know what is. So you can name it whatever you want to. It's still chemical, it's still sprayed, and it's still warfare.
The chemical war did not end with the silence of the guns. It continues to poison Vietnam and her people, 34 years after the withdrawal of the American forces.
I don't know how to explain the feelings I had the moment I saw my son after he was born. Some people said I should leave him at the healthcare center, but I had to take my son home. I knew I had to look after him well.
When my granddaughter was born, she looked quite normal, and we thought we had no problems. But after 6 months, she couldn't sit, and we realized that something was wrong with her arms and legs. And then we realized that she wasn't normal at all.
My dream is that I want to become a painter or a writer, but it is just a dream, because I'm not a normal child.
I'm joined in the studio now by Gerson Smoger, an American human rights lawyer who is working with American veterans and Vietnamese for compensation. Welcome to the show, Gerson. Can you start off by telling me, when did the effects of Agent Orange first come to light or begin to be taken seriously?
They began to be taken seriously in the end of 1969, and then in the late 70s, American soldiers started to talk about the problems. If you're asking me when the companies themselves knew about it, the companies knew as early as the late 1940s that this was a dangerous product.
Vietnam speaks of 1 million victims from the poisoning of Agent Orange. Is that an accurate figure, do you think? Are we talking of something in that scale?
When they said 1 million, they said 1 million victims, but they didn't define that. If you say 1 million people or more have been exposed.
Right. I mean, there is a lot of focus, and I suppose for me, watching the film, the very arresting and quite sort of upsetting images right at the beginning of the film of those, you know, severe physical abnormalities. But there are many other effects aside from physical abnormalities and defects that Agent Orange causes and is still causing.
The largest effect on children is immunological and the way they think and the way the brains work. So these chemicals affect the ability of the body to deal with illness, and it affects the ability of these children to think. But how do you put that onto a visual? It's also causing cancer in these children, and probably massive numbers of cancer into the Vietnamese. But people that have cancer, they look normal. They don't physically look the same. So if you have somebody that you see a structural abnormality, you can show that picture. With advanced surgery, you can do something about that, but you can't do something about somebody's brain, and you can't do something about the way that they're constantly getting sick, and the difficulty of treating cancer isn't there. So there are much more grave problems that occur, but can't be filmed.
US Defense Force documents show 66.5 million litres of chemicals were poured over South Vietnam. They were so powerful that within 2 hours of spraying, leaves would drop off the tree. Repeated spraying killed the roots and trunks, and the devastated remnants were burned by over 100,000 tons of napalm. But Agent Orange created the worst damage.
This is not an historical problem. Absolutely not. This is a present-day problem. The situation that resulted in today's problem was historical, but the problem is not.
When the United States Air Force sprayed a massive amount of chemicals during the war, it did not just destroy the forests and crops, it also badly damaged the people.